So as I kept you waiting so long to see the March section of this project, I thought I'd get on and do the April video a little bit quicker. And if this is the first video in this series that you've seen, you probably wonder what I'm talking about. Well, in a nutshell, this year I've been following along tutorials for a hand stitching project to basically make a quilt with 12 monthly sections, and I've been following the tutorials by a lady called Kathryn on her channel, which is K3N Cloth Tales, and there's a link to her channel in the description below. And each month Kathryn has been setting a theme for the month and also a suggested sewing method to convey that theme. So I've been using her prompts and then doing my own interpretation to make it personal to me. So the idea is at the end of the year, my quilt with its 12 panels will be like an autobiography with 12 chapters. And in the previous videos on this series, I've shown my January, February and March pieces. I'll insert a little clip here so you can see how these pieces look laid out flat, and then we'll come back and I'll show you what I did for April. So here's how the first 3 panels look spread out on my bed, and as you can see I've not put an edging strip down this side, and that's because after all the pieces are together I will do one long strip that goes the whole height. But yeah, so there we go, there's January, February and March joined together, so they've got the edging strip at the top and the bottom. But like I say, I won't be doing the sides until the very end. So as with all the other blocks that I've made, the April section is also 16 by 16 inches approximately. And the theme which Kathryn set for April was about friendship, and her suggested method was making these patchwork stars with 8 points. And these patchwork stars were quite complicated to make. I will in a little while, I'll show you a little diagram of how they're put together, but I'm not going to attempt to explain in detail how to do it, because on Kathryn's channel the video where she was demonstrating this is an hour-long video. So in my video I'm not going to attempt to try and explain that in full detail, but just enough to give you the general idea of how they're constructed. And looking at the fabric that's on these 5 stars, you might think it looks very random and not the sort of colours and patterns that you would normally expect to see together, and you'd be right, there's a very good reason for that. And that is because this is about friendship. I actually asked a few of my special friends if they would be willing to donate some cloth for me to use in a project, and I can't remember how much information I told them. I think I'd said that it was about friendship, but I didn't necessarily explain what I was going to be doing with the fabric. So these fabrics were chosen and given to me by my friends, so that was what I used. I had no control over that. So the choices of colour, the type of material, it was all down to whatever they gave me, not what I personally had chosen to use. So that makes it more special about my friends, because my friends actually in that sense joined in making this with me. Not that they did any of the sewing, but they contributed to the final product. So I'll just briefly tell you a little bit about these friends. I'm not going to go into any personal details, I'm not even going to give their names, but just so you can kind of get an overview of the type of friends I've got. So the lady that gave me this floral fabric, she loves gardening, so this floral fabric is particularly appropriate. And she's quite a bit older than me. In fact, she actually got married the same year that I was born, and I've known her for a really long time, and I'm also friends with one of her daughters as well. This one came from my oldest friend, in the sense that we've been friends since we were about 11 or 12. And I don't know if the camera picks it up, but there's like a little sort of gold kind of sparkly section in the design, which is appropriate because she loves kind of sparkly things. And this one is from one of my oldest friends in terms of age. The lady that gave me this fabric is actually in her 80s, and we've only known each other really in the last few years, but I see her every week, so we've got sort of quite close over a short period of time. The friend who gave me this fabric, this wasn't actually the original fabric she gave me for this project, but I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. I've known her for many years, but we've only kind of got close in more recent years, and she's a really big supporter of my channel, so I know you'll be watching. Thank you. And it always makes me a little bit uncomfortable when she talks about watching my videos on her TV. I don't mind, you know, if somebody's watching on their phone, that's fine, but on a big TV screen it's a little bit unnerving for me. But anyway, thank you for all your support. And the friend who gave me this one, she used to live in the same town as me, but she now lives about 200 miles away. So she actually sent me this piece of cloth in the post, and she said it was from her childhood home. And this is the only one that wasn't from a piece of clothing. It was just like a square of fabric which had just been neatly edged. So I'm guessing maybe they'd used it like as a placemat for on the table. But she did say she had 2 of them, so she sent one to me. And because I knew it was something that was important to her, with the bits that were left over after I'd made this star, I actually used the leftover fabric to make a little pincushion to give back to her. And when I saw her recently and gave it to her, she was really pleased with it. So that was nice, because you know, I didn't want to just give her back like a random little scrap, and I could have kept it and perhaps used it in another project, but I just thought it was nice because it was fabric that was meaningful to her, that I could actually make the leftovers into something to give back. So although these pieces of fabric are from 5 specific friends, as a whole this piece is for all of my friends, not just these 5. So as I mentioned about this one, that this wasn't the original piece of fabric that she gave me, and what I had to start with was this very pale pink embroidered fabric, and this was my first attempt at making one of these stars, and as you can see it's pretty big, so I would have struggled. I mean, I was planning from the beginning to do bigger and smaller ones, but this one just ended up being too big. And also in this first one, the cloth that I was going to use for the background is so thin, and all the seams show through, which I didn't particularly like that much. And like here, for example, the point on the star goes right to the edge, so when I stitched that to something else, the point of the star would have been lost in a seam. So I abandoned that first attempt, and then this was another piece of fabric that she'd given me, you know, just to use in general. She didn't know it was going to end up in this project. She thought it was going to be this one. But it actually turned out quite well, because although these fabrics are all so different. Each one of them has an element of blue, but I've tried to do all the other elements kind of focusing mainly on the different shades of blue to kind of try and link it all. Okay, so at this point I'm going to try and demonstrate how roughly these star patches are made, and as you can see from this one, it's not just the star, like the background pieces are included in the block as well. So I'll just put up on the screen like the individual stars as they were made, and then let me show you the process. If I just move that aside. Okay, so each one of the star blocks, the basis of it is kind of like a 9 patch, which I've mentioned in previous videos. And your squares of fabric may or may not be as wonky as I've drawn them. Now on the stars that Kathryn made, on some of hers she kept the centre the same as the background, so it was kind of like a hollow star, but I wanted to do all of mine solid. So basically you've got 9 squares to start with. The centre one for me was the patterned fabric that I was using, and then the rest started off just as all of the base colour. And then you need 4 additional squares of the pattern, which is kind of cut into triangles. So you've then got 4 squares which have been cut to make 8 triangles of the patterned fabric. Are you with me so far? So the 4 corner pieces just always stay just as the background cloth, so you don't need to do anything with those. But the 4 sort of middle ones, you take one of those and you stitch onto it one of the patterned triangles, and then you cut off the rest of the plain fabric behind, so that it's still just one layer of cloth apart from at the seam. I hope that makes sense. Then you take a second one of the triangles and lay it across this way, and again you cut off the flap that's left underneath, so again it's just one layer of cloth apart from where the seams are. So you need to do 4 of those, which then will end up giving you this look of the sorry, I can't speak and do the colour at the same time. So you've then got your 8-pointed star, and then to join it together the same as you would with a 9 patch is kind of, you join those 3 together in a row, you join those 3 together in a row, and you join those 3 together, so then you've got 3 strips, and then those get joined together as well to make your final square, which has got your 8-pointed star in the middle. So that's very quick, and you know, in Kathryn's video there's extra information about how you want to be lining up your diagonals, what size you want these squares that you're cutting, because they need to be slightly bigger than just the plain background squares. So there's a lot more involved, but I hope that gives just a quick overview of how these blocks are put together. And then once I had those 5 blocks with the stars made, I then needed to add extra strips and pieces of cloth to kind of join them all together. So for example, these 3, the stars are just joined straight onto each other, but then there's a strip of cloth here that sort of separates the 2 bigger ones, and then obviously we've got sections here and a border to kind of fill out the space. I'll put a picture of how it looked with just the stars and the background pieced together. And then where I had these 2 bigger panels, I wanted to put a quote in here, and in hindsight I think it would have been better if I'd done it the other way around, so that the first half of the quote was on this side, so that you sort of like naturally read from left to right. But I hope it makes sense, because I've got the little dots at the end of this one and at the beginning of that one, so you know that this follows on. So I quite liked the quote that says something along the lines of, "You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with," because we are influenced, aren't we, by the people around us. But I decided in the end to use this one, "Show me who your friends are and I'll tell you who you are." And the idea of this is that who we choose as our friends say a lot about who we are as individuals. I don't know who said this, I don't think it's particularly a famous quote, but I just really liked it. And when I did the text, the stitched text for this, initially I did a similar text method to what I've done before, where you just kind of lay the thread in the shape that you want and then just use little couching stitches to kind of get it to stay the shape that you want. But initially I did it and it was just too pale, like it didn't stand out enough. So then I went over it again with a darker blue, and to add like a shadow to kind of help the lettering pop out a little bit more. Maybe if I show you up a little bit closer, I don't know if you can see that there's sort of a full letter with the pale blue, and then the darker blue is just a stitched kind of shadow line to help it stand out. And when I did the blue shadow line, I just did that as like little back stitches. And I think the next thing that I did was I kind of echoed the shape of the stars with three lines of stitching around each one. So for example, on this orange one, the inner row of stitching I've done with a pale orange back stitch, and then I did a row where it was orange and blue alternate. So this is I think what they call the double running stitch, where you do the running stitch in one colour and then you fill in the gaps with a different colour, and then the third row is just the blue running stitch. So my idea was, because I was trying to emphasise that they all had blue, it's kind of, I started on the inner layer with a colour that kind of matched the star, you know, its most predominant colour, and then kind of moving out to sort of that colour plus blue and then blue. So this one's got orange and blue, this one's got pink and blue, this one's just a darker and a lighter blue, this one is green and blue, and this one is white and blue. And I did think about embroidering my friends' names, so perhaps along one of the sides of the star to kind of actually embroider their name. But because I wanted this to represent all my friends, I didn't want to give like excess emphasis to these specific people, but I still wanted to do something, you know, because there was a reason why I chose these 5, like these are special friends, so I did want to do something extra for them, but not so obvious that it kind of discounted any other friends. I hope that makes sense. So when I did these hearts, so this one, I've got a J kind of hidden in the stitching of the heart for that friend. That's her first initial. And then this one is probably the most obvious because there's the darker blue. There's an S. This one is a little bit harder to see because it's a paler colour, but it's also a V. So that really neatly fits into the point of the heart. And then here we've got an E, and this one is an N. So they're just the first initials of those particular friends. As I said, I wanted to include something special as a reminder of who gave me the fabrics, not that I'm likely to forget, but not so obvious. And then there's also other hearts dotted around which don't have letters in, and most of these have been done with chain stitch. So either like this here, where the chain stitch just kind of goes round in the heart shape just to fill in the space, or like this one where it's I was going to say like concentric circles, concentric hearts. And then some where they've been filled in with a different stitch. So this one I've got a chain stitch outline and an inner line, and then the smallest heart in the middle has just been filled with a satin stitch, and then this one here and this one have been filled with the convent stitch. So it's like the satin stitch, but because it's over a bigger area, rather than just having one, oops, sorry, bashed the camera, because it's a long stitch, rather than just leaving that loose that's likely to get caught, it's just got little couching stitches just to hold those longer threads in place. And as you can see, there's lots of little embroidered stars dotted around as well. So again, another indication that this represents all of my friends. Not that each star is allocated to a particular person, but just an abundance of stars for all my friends. And in terms of the colour of the stars, I did basically the same as what I did for the stitched outlines for the big stars. So again, like here, some of the stars are orange and blue, some are just orange, some are just blue, and with this one, these ones are all just blue, but here we've got greens and blue. Again, this one is just blues, and this one pinks and blues. And when it comes to joining this onto the 3 previous blocks that I've joined together, I'm not going to join this straight onto the others. What I will do is I will join April, May and June together in a strip, and then that whole strip will then be joined onto the January, February, March. So in a couple of months, when I get to that point, I will show you how that looks together. Thank you for watching, and thank you to all of my friends for being so lovely. And the fact that you're so lovely means that I must be lovely too, according to this quote anyway. If I've got lovely friends, I must be a lovely person. So yes, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you again soon to show you the May section.